The Bills showed that they still have AFC East supremacy. The Bengals had another humiliating loss. The Jaguars went all the way to London to get their groove back, and a whole lot more coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. After most of Week 4 is concluded, got one more game left. Back to one Monday night game, but we're back to the London games, and pretty soon we'll be on bye weeks. We're getting this rhythm of the season going here. Nick, how was your Week 4?
It was a fun week. It was a fun week. We bounced back in many ways from what was a just flat out disastrous Week 3 in terms of the Pick'em League, in terms of the Circa contest, in terms of most of my fantasy teams, but much more productive here in Week 4. I don't think either of us exactly killed it in staff picks, but
No.
I feel like the games that we felt the strongest about went about as expected. And one of the drawbacks to getting those picks in on Wednesday morning, for example, is I know your best bet was the Browns. I was all over the Cleveland Browns to win that game against the Ravens. Little do we know that when you wake up on Sunday morning, all of a sudden Dorian Thompson-Robinson is under center for the Cleveland Browns. So we saw a few situations where context really changed, from middle of this past week to Sunday morning. But fun week overall. Started off with not the greatest Thursday night game with the Green Bay Packers. At one point, I think late in the second quarter against Detroit, it was 244 to -1 in terms of total yardage. But we had a fun game Sunday morning with the Jags out in London, and then a great slate in the afternoon on Sunday as always. So I'm down to start wherever you want. I want to hit all these games, but we could go wherever you want to kick this off.
Well, let's start with Green Bay. Let's go ahead and get that over with first. That was a beat me down, at least for a half. The second half, I mean, it's hard to evaluate because the Lions had such a prohibitive lead, and the Packers were playing constant catch up there. But a disaster in many senses for the Packers. I mean, they couldn't protect Jordan Love. All those injuries that they dealt with and overcame the week before really took roost. Maybe a short rest had a lot to do with that too. They couldn't protect Love at all. That left side of the offensive line just out, and Bakhtiari out long term. That's a really bad injury for them, and it really showed in this game.
Yeah, no question about that. I think we expected to get a little bit more out of Aaron Jones, a little bit more out of Christian Watson in this game. Both players were ultimately pretty limited. Aaron Jones only played 20 out of a total 57 possible snaps for the Packers. We only saw Christian Watson out there for 26 snaps. So I think, the idea of getting both of those players back ended up being a little bit less than what their true impact was. Christian Watson did catch a touchdown, but kind of a broken coverage, short yardage situation where he was left alone in the end zone. We didn't really see any of Christian Watson, the type of plays that you envision from him, streaking down the field, stretching the field for this Packers offense. That was never really in the cards. And part of the reason for that was Green Bay's offensive line just got pummeled in this game, especially in the first half. I mean, credit to the Packers for making this like somewhat of an interesting game. And if it wasn't for Quay Walker, for some reason, just going rogue and deciding to jump over the line on a field goal late in the second half, Green Bay might have had a chance to really pull something off here. And look, it never felt like Green Bay had enough momentum to ever, truly come back and tie or win this game. But it was getting somewhat interesting in the second half before that Quay Walker penalty. In the first half, this was as lopsided of a game as we've seen all year. And that includes the Giants and Dallas in Week 1. I know that game got out of hand immediately, but consider there that you had a pick six, you had a blocked field goal go back for a touchdown. Like, this was 100% like Detroit just dominating Green Bay. There weren't those fluky plays. There wasn't a punt return or anything like that. I mean, it was just Green Bay not being able to do anything offensively and then not do anything to stop Detroit defensively. I mean, it was as much of a one-sided first half as we've seen.
Yeah, and so many things went wrong for me in this one. I have Aaron Jones in some leagues. I have Christian Watson in some leagues. I decided I'll hold off on Watson coming back from not playing at all this season. Didn't know the trust the volume. Okay. I mean, I missed out on a touchdown, but it didn't destroy me. But I was like, I need Aaron Jones. The Packers need Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon's really shown that he can't handle the load. Yep. I put Jones in. I got my 2.5 points in those leagues where I have him. Yeah. And that just set the tone. I had Luke Musgrave going in a couple of leagues. He got concussed. Yeah. It was a nasty, cold, and brutish game for the Packers. I even I let people talk me into moving Jordan Love up in my rankings, bullied me into that. Don't get bullied by the comments. Just stick to your guns. It's just I mean, again, Love got the late production, which salvaged his fantasy day.
Yeah.
It's tough. Mateo, I know you're 0-4. It is going to be okay. You know, sometimes you have a bad start, sometimes you have a bad team, but we bounce back the next year. But the good news is, unlike the NFL, if you start off 0-4, you have to overcome, half a conference.
Right.
Here, you're only having to overcome about like 7 other jamokes in your league. So you still got a chance to, and all that matters is getting into the playoffs. There's no home field advantage in most fantasy leagues. I think we've bandied about that concept at times, but for the most part, the most advantage you get is choosing your opponent. Sometimes you get it, but I almost think the higher seed should get a point advantage, but like the NFFC kind of does.
Yeah.
Still live is my point. But I hear you. It was tough. It can be tough all over. And I have one team that is just that tough. Any other Packers Lions things you want to share?
Not really. I mean, we saw a very frustrated Matt LaFleur both at halftime of this game, after the game. I mean, about as exasperated as we've ever seen him. And, having Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback for most of your tenure means that you're not often in these situations. But he looked upset. I think he was upset with the effort, especially of the offensive line early in this game. Jordan Love was sacked 5 times. 4 of those were in the first half. And I think he was upset with some of the defensive scheming. He's defended Joe Barry more than anybody. But even he, kind of had a chance to take Joe Barry's back and said something to the effect of, "Look, we're running the same thing every time and expecting different results. That's insane behavior." So I think the only way I could really read that is, kind of sending a message to Joe Barry that, hey man, get your defense together. You let David Montgomery run 32 times for 121 yards. I mean, when Green Bay absolutely needed to get a couple stops late in this game, they just could not do it. And Detroit was, 1st and 10. They were getting 7-8 yards at will on this Packers defensive line. Right when Green Bay had started to get some momentum, they hit that long ball. I think it was to Jaden Reed. They had the touchdown to Christian Watson. All of a sudden, it's a 10-point game at the end of the third quarter. We saw Green Bay come back and put up 18 points unanswered against the New Orleans Saints a week ago. So you're thinking, all right, here we go again. Jordan Love, he's starting to heat up. The Lions put together a 14-play, 9-minute touchdown drive to slam the door shut. To me, I think that's what Matt LaFleur was most upset about, that this defense just could not get it off the field when you knew the Lions were running, were basically lining up to run the ball every single down, and Green Bay was just getting blown off the line. So a lot of things went well for Detroit tonight, which, by the way, on like the second play of the game, Jared Goff threw a pick to Rudy Ford, and you're thinking, all right, man, Detroit's going to be in trouble here. And that turned out to be a harbinger of absolutely nothing in this game. But really the big difference for me, and then we can move on, was the Detroit offensive line, I thought, dominated this game.
Yep. 100%. Well, you talked about Montgomery. So much for like multiple week absence. So much for easing him back in after missing one game. 32 carries, and early on he was just creasing them a lot too. Absolutely right. One other thing: Jamison Williams comes back this week for the Lions. Shortened the suspension by 2 games, so he's back in week 5 and not week 7. So we'll see if they work him in. And in fact, if he's recovered from that hamstring injury, and let alone into the game plan. But that's just one more weapon that they have. In the long term, he might be available in some leagues. I think you get him cheap now as opposed to waiting till he plays.
Yeah, I think you go and grab him, and you probably don't start him right away. And I guess you are prepared to live with the possibility that he comes back and has a big impact right away. But I don't think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's going to be the case. But all it's going to take is like one big play. It doesn't even have to be a touchdown, right? Like if he has a 60-yard reception next week and that's all he does, there's going to be someone out there who grabbed him. I'm looking right now, Jeff, on ESPN. He's only 16% rostered. Obviously those tend to be shallower leagues. Sure. You're usually only starting 2 receivers.
That's the league where you want to grab them. Yeah.
Well, right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, if you're playing in the NFFC or whatever, he's not going to be there. But a lot of listeners are playing in at least one casual league. There's a very good chance that Jamison Williams is out there. I would make a cursory ad. And again, you're probably not starting him right away, but you're hoping that he's progressed on some of the issues that they pointed out coming into the year. As long as drops aren't a problem, as long as discipline's not a problem, there's no reason that he can't emerge as the number 2 receiver.
Agreed. Absolutely agree. And look, to your point, I'm looking him up in the NFFC right now to see what sort of rostership he has. I think he is 100% rostered in the primetime qualifier. Let's pull up the primetime. Why would I go to the qualifier? I don't know. It's still 100% rostered though. Huh, who knew?
Wow.
Crazy. And 0% started. So everybody's on the ball there. Both ways, and same with the online championship, 100% rostered. So there you go. Good luck trying to add them in that sort of format. But in your shallower formats, you can still get a chance crack at that opportunity there. All right. Spent a lot of time for a game on the Thursday night game. We got a lot more to go through here.
Yeah.
It's weird how we do that. Jacksonville and Atlanta. Good day for you. Did you getting up early? So, dude, I was in Arizona, having to hit the road beforehand. I got up at 5:15 to answer questions, update the value meter. We left at 7:30. I listened to a lot of the game on the second half on the car ride back, and then I did the rewatch when I got home. Boy, Desmond Ridder is just he is a rough watch.
Yeah, Desmond Ridder handed this game to the Jags, really the second week in a row that the Falcons could not overcome their own starting quarterback. I think it's easy to look at the final score and think, all right, Jacksonville, they got their bounce back game. The Jags played fine. It wasn't a disaster. It wasn't like last week against Houston, but to me, this was much more about the Falcons just, again, not being able to survive Desmond Ridder throwing picks on back-to-back balls in the first half. One of those was returned by Darius Williams, the longest pick six in European football history, or at least European NFL history. 61 yards there. Ridder was it's what we've seen from him really all year, right? Anytime you're forcing him to throw downfield, he doesn't look comfortable. The ball's coming out wobbly. It's coming out inaccurate. The Williams picked off was just way late. Mac Hollins kind of going at him on the sideline. That's never a great sign. Kind of a Zach Wilson-ish type of interaction for the Falcons.
When Mac Hollins doesn't have your back, you've lost the room.
Well, hey, that's your second receiver. That's your number 2 receiver, Mac Hollins. Although maybe Jonnu Smith holds that title at this point. I mean, he continues to vastly outproduce Kyle Pitts every single week. Just a complete travesty what they're doing with Kyle Pitts. But Jacksonville looked good defensively in this game. I mean, 3 more sacks for Josh Allen, who I believe is up to 6 now on the year. He's quietly kind of been the only player on that defense who's showing up week in and week out. We saw Calvin Ridley, I guess, get back on track. Had a long touchdown on a broken coverage to begin this game, but only finished with 2 targets. Really was not a key piece in this offense. Once again, we saw the Jaguars rely very heavily on short passes. Lawrence only threw 4 passes that traveled longer than 15 yards down the field. Just short balls, short balls, short balls. Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram were heavily involved there. Jags really didn't do a whole lot on the ground either. ETN carried 20 times for just 55 yards. So this was a really boring, pretty ugly game outside of the defensive plays by the Jags.
Yeah, it's just because they didn't quite get right. The final score was nice, but it was the defense that carried the day. Jacksonville on the second pick had great field position, failed on 4th down, could have got points there. 3rd and 4th down. I mean, they did convert a key 4th down on that first touchdown drive, and that was something that they hadn't done in a while. So they had that going for them, but they're still 3rd and 4th down, still a problem for this team.
It just shouldn't come to that as often as it is.
I agree
for Jacksonville. I mean, the amount of 3rd and 2s that this team turns into a 4th and 1, it's just amazing. And again, I don't think they're taking, for as accurate and highly graded as Trevor Lawrence has been this season. He's been really, really good. The throws have been where they need to be. I don't know why they're not opening things up a little bit more down the field. And obviously that's a little bit easier said than done, especially when you're missing Jamal Agnew, you're missing Zay Jones. Again, I mean, we saw a very, very limited pass catching group outside of the top 3 this past week, but they're just such a conservative offense. I almost feel like I'm watching a team that has a quarterback that it doesn't trust. They're using Trevor Lawrence as if he's like Justin Fields or something.
It's a game manager.
Yeah, it's so strange. The game planning is almost like they're preventing him from taking the top off of defense intentionally. And it's sometimes the game against Houston, you're thinking, all right, maybe this is a wake up call. Maybe this is going to force this team to operate differently. And then when you win a game like this, it's you're not going to complain about the result. Of course, you're happy to be 2-2. You got the Bills next week, but I still don't think what they're doing offensively with Lawrence is really sustainable if you're hoping to beat the really good teams in the NFL. I think the Jags right now are a team that's going to beat the teams it should beat, and it's not going to beat the teams that are maybe a level up. It's not really going to compete with them with how they're running this offense.
Kind of reminiscent of Atlanta last year when they were winning games.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah. Kyle Pitts, we got to bench him, don't we?
I think you do, man. I mean, this is one of those scripts where the Jags led this game 17-0 at the half, right? And if you're rostering Kyle Pitts, if you're starting him, this is kind of what you want in some ways. Even though we've seen Atlanta try to run its way back into games, you want the Falcons to be forced to throw the ball 30 plus times, and that's what happened. But when your quarterback is Desmond Ridder, when you're dropping back that many times, you're only looking Kyle Pitts' way 4 times on the day. Meanwhile, Jonnu Smith catches all 6 of his targets for 95 yards. I mean, it's extremely disheartening. I think the only thing that would maybe prevent me from trying to sell off Kyle Pitts or bench him is, do we see Taylor Heineke at some point? Arthur Smith deflected that after the game. He was asked about it at the half as well. He said Desmond Ridder is our guy. We got to take him at his word for now, but I think we are week to week right now on Ridder as far as him having a grasp on this job.
Yeah, he's their guy, just like everybody in the U.S. Ryder Cup team loves Patrick Cantlay.
They love him.
Okay, love him. Great teammate. All right, let's move on. You alluded to it. The Cleveland Browns. We do submit our staff picks on Wednesday morning. Even if you asked me Saturday night, I would have told you that Deshaun Watson was going to play. I really thought that was going to be the case. And turns out, nope. They let us know about 2 hours before kickoff he's not going to play. And DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, came in, got the start, and looked every bit like the rookie making his first appearance in the NFL.
He sure did. And, I was kind of trying to talk myself into like, maybe this Browns pick will be okay. The defense will show up. Thompson-Robinson, he's kind of elusive. We'll see what he can do. I mean, this was like one of the more like obvious, this guy is not ready to play in the NFL starts that we've ever seen. And we usually get like 2 or 3 of those a year. There's some weird situation with this. Thompson-Robinson, people were excited about him, had some plays in the preseason. Certainly, this is a really tough spot finding out the morning of the game, against the Baltimore Ravens in a big divisional game that you're starting. Not many people would succeed in that role. So I don't really blame him, but I mean, it was pretty obvious early on that Cleveland was going to have a tough time doing anything offensively. When you have a quarterback who the defense is trying to bait into throwing interceptions all day, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot on the ground. That was certainly the case. 25 carries for 93 yards as a team for Cleveland, although they did lose 20 on Elijah Moore running backwards like 4 separate times and taking a 20-yard loss on a reverse play. That did not end well. But really, I mean, there's not a lot to say here. I mean, once it became clear that Thompson-Robinson was a little overwhelmed, you're just kind of waiting back and saying, all right, when is the next interception coming? And he ultimately ended with 3 of those. Nonetheless, for as good as Cleveland's looked on defense, I think you got to tip your cap to the Ravens here. I mean, a nice day for Lamar Jackson, big day for him fantasy-wise, 4 total touchdowns. I think the Ravens went pretty conservative and were still able to succeed with that.
Yeah, he still got sacked 3 times, but it's interesting. They only let him throw 19 times. By the way, I think Cleveland knew all along and just didn't tell anybody. That's
I don't. Stefanski said this morning that Watson was medically cleared and it was Watson's decision. And the way it was phrased was, I sensed a little frustration almost, or a little like, hey man, it was his call. But yeah, I mean, again, that didn't come out until an hour or 2 ago. So I'm not really sure. I mean, like I said, there's a player being medically cleared and then a player saying, I don't think I can operate with the shoulder, which, I don't think we need to call Deshaun Watson's toughness into question by any means. I just thought that was an interesting thing to reveal if you're Stefanski.
So I was on the road yesterday morning. Do you happen to know how much the line shifted after that announcement?
So, when I checked it in the morning, because after the Watson news had surfaced on maybe Friday, there was that initial report that, he might not play. I think it went from Cleveland -3 down to Cleveland -1.5. And then early yesterday morning, it was back to Cleveland 2.5. So I'm thinking, okay, that's an indication that Watson will play. Just before game time, I checked. This was via the CBS app. I'm not sure where their odds come in. And it was Ravens -2.
Okay.
So pretty significant swing.
But not nearly significant enough. This was a 10-point swing at least. I really thought
a lot of faith was put in this Cleveland defense. Yeah. Well, and I think the Browns too. It's like, it's hard to quantify, but when you realize 5 minutes into a game that your offense is just not going to be able to do anything, I think that puts your defense in a tough spot. Like the Ravens, the first pick from Thompson-Robinson, the Ravens are set up 1st and goal at the 10-yard line. It wasn't like the Browns defense didn't show up. I think they were just put in some really bad situations.
Yeah, exactly right there. All right, we'll see. Browns. I mean, they get the bye this week, and then they get the Niners after this. So I wonder if having the bye upcoming maybe also influenced the decision not to play Watson a little bit there. But you have to sacrifice a game to do that. It's very weird. All right, let's hit one more game before we get our first commercial note. Let's talk a little bit about let's just get this Bengals game over with here. The Bengals are in real trouble. They're it's Burrow's calf, but it's more than that. I mean, I think the line's not very good again. I thought they had, I think they had fixed it, but I mean, Burrow was under constant pressure again. The defense made countless bad play, 3 plays in a row, Tannehill burned them on their first touchdown drive. And then the Bengals had like all these killer critical penalties later on. Like, you want to get off the field? No. You're gonna commit an automatic first down type of penalty there. Jets fans can relate to this a little bit, but I think they're in real trouble. I mean, they go out to Arizona next week. We'll see if and they're feisty. I don't know if they're good, but at least they're feisty. We'll see.
I'm going out of my way to not look at the lines today so we can play Guess the Lines on SXM.
All right, good job.
I cannot wait to see what that Bengals at Cardinals line is, because that is a tricky game all of a sudden. I mean, the Cardinals, we'll get to them later. I mean, obviously they lose big to San Francisco, but I actually thought they looked pretty decent considering the mismatch in talent and coaching there.
Oh, it was a cover for 47 minutes of that game, easily.
Don't even get me started on that. I mean, I know you and I were both on Arizona, I believe, in staff picks, and I mean, they had a couple chances at the end there. We were also on KC.
Zach Ertz impersonation. Whoa.
Yeah. Well, a ball went through, I think it was Zach Pascal in the last play of the game. They had another chance.
Yep.
We also used the Chiefs in Circa, which was devastating to watch. You knew exactly what was going to happen there. Like, I'm sitting there watching the game with my fiance. I'm like, we need Mahomes to throw this ball, because if he crosses the first down marker, he's too smart and he's not running this in. So we basically fell like a yard and a half short of winning that one. But anyway, we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Beyond Arizona, I mean, they get Seattle, they get the Niners, and they get the Bills in their 3 games after that. I mean, I think we're a little bit worried about this Arizona game, and that's their easiest opponent of the next 4. So you're totally right. I mean, it's close to panic, especially with T. Higgins, who separately might be one of the biggest, 3 biggest busts in fantasy football so far. He goes out of this game. I believe it was a rib injury. He might end up missing some time. Jamar Chase sounded really frustrated for the second time this year with how he's being used in this offense. This is a game that I actually didn't watch a ton of in the early window. You probably saw more. I mean, was it as bad as it looked offensively for Cincy?
So this was part of the drive back from Phoenix, and I had the pleasure of listening to the Tennessee broadcast on this one too, which just pouring a little extra salt in that wound there. And not that they're bad, but it's just a clear, exultory, broadcast. I'm like, again, another penalty again. Wait, pause. Touchdown Titans. Oh God. Gets to the 10, gets to the 5, gets in the end zone. Pause. Touchdown Titans. Oh, it's painful.
Man, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's tough for any fan having to listen to a road broadcast.
It was tough. Frostbite says Burrow is doing a Baker Mayfield impersonation. I mean that the worst way possible, hurting the team by being tough. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I have to go back and watch kind of the every snap compilation for Burrow this afternoon. I was kind of basing my opinion on this game of what we saw from Cincy last week against what I think is still a pretty good Rams team and a really well-coached Rams team right now. And, they obviously Burrow was limited, but it worked. He threw the ball 50 plus times. I thought that the quick game was the way they were moving Jamar Chase around. You're coming up against a Titans team that could not do anything offensively last week against Cleveland. They have a secondary that you should be able to exploit. Like, I really thought Cincy was going to be in a good situation here. I think I said, on the show last week, like, if you could guarantee me that Joe Burrow makes it through this game, I don't see Cincinnati losing. And I was just completely wrong on that. I mean, the Bengals offense put together a long drive, ended with a field goal to start this game, and really got nothing the rest of the way. Like, wasn't even close to scoring at any point after that. Like, I need to go back and watch like exactly what shut down those 4 straight punts, excuse me, in the first half after that field goal drive. And then, in the middle of that, you're giving up 3 straight touchdown drives as well to an offense that hasn't really been able to move the ball on anybody this year. Derrick Henry finally got it going. We talked about that last week. It was an eerily similar situation last year. 3 terrible games to begin the year, had a big breakout in week 4. And that's exactly what happened here.
3-3 game. They have them pinned deep, like 3rd and 16 or something like that. Maybe it's a little less than that, but still deep in their own territory. And Tannehill hits a long pass to Hopkins, and the game changed after that. A 20-yard play to Westbrook-Ikini after that, and then a touchdown pass right after that. 3, boom, boom, boom. 3 plays in a row, like 75 yards. Game changed. And then all of a sudden, you couldn't put 8 guys in the box against Henry. You couldn't. You got to face some lighter boxes. The tackling on his touchdown run was hideous. They were confused at the half, right before the half on the Derrick Henry touchdown pass. When you see Tannehill in motion and then they call a timeout and they come back from the timeout and are still fooled by the play, something is wrong here. Nothing wrong. I have nothing against the coaching staff. Obviously, you can't after the last 2 years, but The players just, they maybe the short week had something to do with it. They're playing on Monday night, going on the road. Maybe there's more to that than we're giving it credit for, but they just, they got punched in the mouth and couldn't get back up. It was just one of those ugly games. I don't want to say anything more about it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a place to play head-to-head fantasy football games without the huge tournaments, salary caps, or complicated game types, then Rival Fantasy is where you want to play this NFL season. From a twist on a classic game with Fantasy Bingo, where players generate a lineup to complete achievements and get bingo, to head-to-head fantasy challenges where you'll pick which of two players score more fantasy points, this is the best of fantasy sports. For the 2023 NFL season, Rival Fantasy is offering new users a $200 deposit match plus a $25 first play voucher. Rival Fantasy is so confident you'll love the experience, they're giving you the money to play out of the gate. Experience the future of fantasy sports on Rival Fantasy and become a rival today. Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson here. Let's talk about the game of the century of the week, which turned out to be a blowout. The Bills taking it to the Dolphins, leading 31-14 at halftime, winning 48-20. And there were some coulda, shoulda, woulda moments in this game, but I mean, the Bills got stopped like once all day.
Yeah, I was on the right side of this one. I've had a lot of bad calls this year, but I kind of felt like, Miami going from facing that just horrific Broncos defense to a Bills defense that had, kind of felt like it was peaking at the right time after 2 great weeks. It would be a tough adjustment for the Dolphins, and that's pretty much what happened. But really, I mean, the Buffalo offense, I think, was the bigger driving force here. I mean, Miami scored on its first 2 drives. We had 5 straight touchdowns between the 2 teams to open this game, and you're thinking, all right, I mean, this might be just a kind of a first to 55 type of situation. But as the day went along, we saw Buffalo get to Tua, sacked 4 times on the afternoon. Had just looked a little uncomfortable. Was throwing some inaccurate passes. We haven't really seen that from him over the previous few weeks. Kind of just an odd game statistically. Like Stephon Diggs did so much of the heavy lifting for Buffalo. Nice day for Josh Allen as well. But you see 48 points on the board for the Buffalo Bills. James Cook, got his touchdown, but 12 carries for 29 yards. Buffalo actually did not have a ton of success running the ball, but hit some big plays. The defense really stepped up for the Bills. And, honestly, early in the second half, you kind of felt like this game was over. The second interception by Tua happens, and then the Bills go down and immediately score. That was the 3rd touchdown of the day, I believe, for Stephon Diggs. And at that point, all of a sudden it was 41-20. Even though there were 6 minutes left in the 3rd quarter, you just kind of felt like Miami was beaten down at that point. And ultimately they were. I mean, they went out on downs on their next 3 drives. Yeah.
And there's a little asterisk on that. They had a touchdown to Waddle that got called back with an illegal man downfield. And then they had another one that was blown up by a sack. But to your point, I mean, the pass rush was getting it to a lot. The Bills did to the Dolphins what the Dolphins have been doing to everybody else and put the pressure on them like, oh, God, we got to score every possession because they're going to do that to us. They actually ran the ball well on the first 2 drives, and then not much. They didn't need to after that, pretty much. But the very first drive, they were running the ball well, and that kind of opened the door up for everything else, it felt like to me.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, a ton of penalties on the Miami side as well. You mentioned the big Waddle one. I mean, they had almost 100 yards in penalties on 8 flags throughout the day. But when you dig in, it's like, I mean, they ran more plays than the Bills. Like the total yardage was, about 20 yards apart. Same number of drives. I mean, the passing yards were there. The yards per play weren't all that different. First downs were comparable. Like, I think this is somewhat of a misleading final score, but you also tip your cap to the Bills here for how well this defense played. They did lose Tre'Davious White though at the end of this game to an Achilles injury. That is brutal. I mean, this feels like 2nd or 3rd year in a row where the Bills are, everything's going their way, and then an injury like that kind of completely changes the long-term calculus. I mean, certainly doesn't knock them out, but that is a huge loss. We saw, was it last year or the year before when they were without Tre'Davious White? I mean, that makes a difference for this defense.
I was just going to say, we see what happens when they lose White. We see what happens when they lose Von Miller. Losing that key component. This year, they were better prepared for that. It was that's a big blow to them. I mean, the offense is running as well as it's possibly could. All the rumors about the discord between Diggs and Allen, I think we can put that to rest right now. Tyreek Hill only got 5 targets. Now I think a lot of that was pass rush based, and they probably bracketed him a little bit more. And again, divisional game. They played each other 3 times last year. Last time with Skylar Thompson, obviously, but the familiarity issue is big there. And in fact, the regular season game in Buffalo, if you recall, I think that was like I want to say that was around Christmas, and it was a cold, snowy game, and Tua went nuts in that game. They learned from that. The Bills did, and they created a lot more pressure. So that was pretty big there. I don't really have too many other observations from this game. It's just one of those.
I got a couple that I'll just run through quick for fantasy.
Okay.
I mean, we did see Dalton Kincaid outsnap Dawson Knox.
Okay.
More importantly, dominated the number of routes run. The snaps were fairly comparable, but I believe this was the first time all season that Kincaid has actually won that battle. So it's, kind of felt like it's been moving that way. They like to use both, but I think Kincaid certainly looks like the higher upside guy and is the guy to own in dynasty formats, no question. Devin Achane as well, right? I mean, we got the kind of got the split that we were hoping for if you went and picked him up and threw him out in your lineup. I mean, 39-28 was the snap share in favor of Achane. Of course, still no Jeff Wilson. We'll see if that changes. Salvin Ahmed was active, barely played. They kind of just went with the two backs, but Achane looked the part, man. I was a little bit skeptical, as far as you look at what he did last week and you think, you just kind of expect that he's going to be blowing up every single week. But to go for 101 with 2 touchdowns against this Bills defense when it felt like a lot of things went wrong for Miami, and of course, for him to win that snap share over Mostert, who was arguably even better than him last week, that to me is a really, really positive indication. I still do want to see, once Jeff Wilson's back, that they force him into the mix. But I think if you went and picked up Achane last week, you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, Mostert put the ball on the ground twice, losing one of them. He also made a sweet catch on a wheel route. The first 2 drives, Miami went boom, 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 and answered Buffalo right away. And it looked like we were just going to be in the shootout of all shootouts. And then, all it took was Buffalo getting 1 stop, and it felt like the game it got to 28-14 just like that, and it felt like, oh, they're in trouble here. And sure enough, they were. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next game because we got a lot more to cover here. Let's hit up Chicago and Denver. Justin Fields for three and a half quarters of the game, maybe 3/4 of the let's say 3/4 of the game. Really looked like he was having a good day. I mean, he was having a good day. 3 for 4 touchdowns, for crying out loud. Looked like it was redemption day, and then he had the fumble 6, and then it got picked on the last play. But that's I don't really blame him because they were like deep mode and all that. But this was a game Chicago should not have lost. They're up 28-7, first of all, and then just the sequence of events in the fourth quarter.
This game completely delivered on what we were hoping for, right? It was actually pretty well played, especially through those first 3 quarters. Like the Bears looking as competent as they did was not the result that I expected, but it just felt a little bit too good to be true, right? Like Justin Fields, I think it's safe to say had they won this game, that would have been the best game of his career. I mean, passing the ball, he looked like a completely different player. And then it's ironic that we see something somewhat similar from Zach Wilson in the Sunday night game. But I mean, this was the best Fields has looked in a very long time. It was the most confident that he's looked. They had him rolling out a bit more. You could tell, kind of buying time, surveying the field, having the option to run. He looked like he felt a lot more comfortable. I also think we have now confirmed that this Denver defense is just horrific. I don't know what happened to this team year over year. Obviously, you lose your coordinator, you lose a few pieces, but I mean, this defense is awful. You can see why Miami put up 70 a week ago, but it's just only the Bears could find a way to lose this game, right? I mean, like you said, 28-7 at one point. Denver did not get its second touchdown until the final seconds of the third quarter. So, I mean, you basically made a 21-point comeback in the fourth quarter. I think the play that you think of most, the Fields fumble 6, at first you're thinking, was the arm going forward? As soon as you see the replay, very clearly it wasn't. There's really no argument even from the Bears. That one, you felt like, oh boy, the things are getting away from us. But then Chicago puts together a drive. You're thinking, all right, they're going to take this clock down. They're going to get a field goal. They opt to go for it on 4th and 1, 2 minutes, 52 seconds left from the Denver 18, and Khalil Herbert gets stuffed.
Well, that description doesn't do it justice because, first of all, they lined up, called, they tried to draw him off sides, did that, called a timeout, came back, and then this was the play. I hated the fact they were in shotgun formation, the handoff. Yep. So it takes Herbert time to get going. He doesn't have a head of steam. Yep. Oh, and by the way, you have Justin Fields, who is very fast and very mobile, and you decide that's your play call, running it into the pile. I had a real problem with that. Earlier, they barely converted a 4th down conversion where they did a direct snap to Cole Kmet.
That was...
Yeah, and I said that right.
That was awful. Yeah, I saw our guy Danny Burke was lighting up Twitter about that one. He's like, I know it worked, but are you kidding me? Apparently, that's like been a pet player of theirs for the last couple of years. I don't understand it. I mean, you also have Deontay Foreman, who again did not have a carry in this game. I know he's kind of been out of the mix, but like that's the guy I would run in a 4th and 1. It wouldn't be Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, and in fairness, Herbert had a good game. He was running well, and earlier on that drive, he ran over like 4 people. So I get it, but when the whole world knows it's coming, it's not an effective play. And Fields is having the game of his life. Spread the field, let him do some things there. I understand the fumble 6 happened. Some of that's on him for not seeing the blitz coming. Some of that is, maybe block that guy. I don't know. He had no time at all on that play. Yes. So frustrating. So frustrating. Speaking of frustrating, Marvin Mims had 12 snaps, I think, or 12. I don't know if it's snaps or routes, but point is they barely used him. He had a big play to set up the game-winning field goal, but hey, let's try using him a little bit more. He's good at football. And meanwhile, like we're getting Brandon Johnson scoring again. So he's up to like 4 touchdowns on 10 targets. Which is so frustrating. There are people, someone's going to say, I picked him up and streamed him this week. And yeah, I won. Okay. Yeah, I got 7 points. Good job. But of course, Javonte Williams got hurt. Jaleel McLaughlin looks like a real deal. He looks the part. Of course, he looks the part against the Bears. We'll see what he does against the Jets this week. It might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I was impressed by him for sure. You mentioned Khalil Herbert did have a good game prior to getting stuff there. He's basically taken over, I think, as the very clear guy. There was a little Roschon Johnson momentum these last couple of weeks. He'd taken at least 50% of the 3rd down snaps in weeks 2 and 3. That all faded away. It was Herbert 6-1 on 3rd down in terms of snaps this week. So we like that if you're holding Herbert. You mentioned Mims too. I mean, 5 catches of at least 30 yards already this season for a guy who's not playing that much at all. He ran 12 routes on 17 snaps. Both he and Brandon Johnson played 17 snaps. So they're basically going Sutton and Judy more often than not with a tight end, whether that's Adam Troutman or I think Chris Manhertz is the other guy in the mix. And then, kind of a rotation of Johnson or Mims or even little Jordan Humphrey, who we saw with a catch in this game as well. But it's kind of a 2 receiver system. And like the Brandon Johnson thing, it's like the touchdown numbers are hard to ignore at this point. I think if he's out there in a deeper league, you probably grab him, but mostly because there's just not any other appealing options.
Yeah. Denver ran 48 plays. They got out, gained 471 to 311. First downs are 26 to 17. Hard for any of our guys to get enough use if you're on the Denver side of things when, Chicago they couldn't get Chicago off the field. I think that was one of the big things. As you said before, this Denver defense is really bad. And I think that's a major takeaway there. McLaughlin's going to be a heavy fab guy this week if Williams looks like he's going to miss this week, which I'd presume he would.
I would think so too. We'll have to wait a few days. They do get the Jets, so not a great matchup on paper. They're at the Chiefs after that, but again, it's going to be pretty slim pickings here, barring any massive injuries in this Monday night game. So I think McLaughlin is going to be somebody that you're looking at running back and what should otherwise be a pretty quiet week on the waiver wire.
Yeah, should be. In fact, when I did sneaky ads with Alan earlier today, we were kind of struggling. I like Michael Wilson on the Cardinals a little bit there. See if Jameson Williams available, and we get to tight ends. Well, I'll talk about tight ends because it's Denver. Ty Conklin for the Jets going against Denver. Denver is a tight end funnel. They lost their starting safety on week 1, if you recall. They've had safety issues all season long, so I think that can be exploitable.
Yeah, no question. We saw Conklin, win the snap battle pretty convincingly last night. I mean, Jeremy Ruckert was involved. The Jets actually use a ton of tight ends, so it's a little bit. They're going to use
Darius Rucker. I mean,
right, exactly. But nonetheless, 40 snaps for Tyler Conklin, 23 routes run. That's a good note. I think the Denver defense and the Minnesota defense, if you're playing those teams, get them out there.
Exactly. Let's talk a little Houston and Pittsburgh. First of all, CJ Stroud again, 300 plus yards, no picks.
The guy's unreal, man. I continue to be really surprised by this. You got to respect it. I really thought of the 3 rookie quarterbacks, he's the one who would struggle the most. I didn't love the situation. You're bringing in a first year kind of defensive head coach, a guy who, for the most part, threw from a clean pocket at Ohio State. There's just kind of a lot of things that I felt like weren't going in his favor, at least for year 1. But I mean, we're getting to the point now where this is like one of the best starts ever for a rookie. He's already blasted through the record for most passes without an interception. I don't care what quarterback you are, who you turn out to be in 10 years, going this long without throwing a single pick, not having a ball tipped, not having something, kind of a bad luck play go against you is really, really impressive. And I mean, we have to have a conversation, Jeff, about just like, what is this Texans team? I mean, this is back-to-back blowouts against Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. Granted, these are not, 2 of the 5 or even 10 best teams in the league, in my opinion, but you're doing this to Mike Tomlin. You're doing this to a great Steelers defense. And when we talked about this on the show last week, I was leaning Pittsburgh. I picked Pittsburgh in staff picks because I thought this Steelers defense would do what the Jags defense did not, and that was get pressure on CJ Stroud. I thought this would be a game where he's on the ground 4, 5, 6 times because TJ Watt's going crazy. For the second straight week, CJ
0 zip nada sacks. Pretty crazy. And I think I cut out, or maybe you did for a second. So I was giving you the 0 sign, but I was also not hearing you when you were talking there. So for a second there, but yeah, I astounded. Also, for the 39th consecutive week, the Steelers could not put 400 yards on the board. Fire Matt Canada. When do we do this now?
I mean, this is reaching critical levels, and I think well, it'll be a test of Mike Tomlin's loyalty because I think we've reached that point. And if I don't think you'll talk to a single Steelers fan that says, yeah, we got to see this through. We got to give him a chance here. And we also buried the lead that Kenny Pickett went down in this game, and they do think he's avoided like an ultra serious injury, but still could be something where he misses multiple weeks. Seems like he'll almost certainly be out of the Steelers next game. So chances are that's going to be Mitch Trubisky. We went through that experience last year. I don't think he really brings anything to this offense that Kenny Pickett does not. I mean, maybe slightly better mobility. I think they're actually kind of the same player in a lot of ways. Pat Freiermuth also dealing with a hamstring injury. That'll be something to watch. We could get our first kind of real look at Darnell Washington, who played more snaps on Sunday with Freiermuth leaving that game. Not a whole lot of other takeaways here. I mean, you got to chalk it up to the Texans being a much better team than we expected. Really surprised that they were able to control that Pittsburgh defensive line. I did think Najee Harris actually looked pretty good. I mean, had like 2 or 3 plays where he's just like blasting through tackles. He was spinning all over the place, finished 14 for 71. Obviously, it's going to be buried in a performance like this for Pittsburgh, but I actually thought on a snap-for-snap basis, this was pretty easily his best game of the year.
Yeah, and yet, what did that mean? Not much. 225 total yards offensively, 451 for the Texans. This was a beat me down. There's no fluke about this score line at all. If anything, it could have been even a bigger blowout. We saw a trick play touchdown. Devin Singletary throwing a pass for a touchdown. That's the only way that Dalton Schultz can score. But Nico Collins went off in this game. I wanted to mention this with Denver too. When elite corners go bad, they stay bad. Patrick Peterson is not a good corner these days. Patrick Surtain is not getting stopped by it, is not shutting down anybody. DJ Moore had himself a day against him. Surtain's gotten beat by other teams too. I don't think he's the same shutdown guy this year. Maybe it's the scheme that's preventing that. I don't know, but Surtain was on Moore for a lot of Moore's damage yesterday. So, and I know Peterson is just, he's just straight up bad right now.
Yep. No question about that. I mean, it's just, he's kind of at that like Julio Jones point, but on the other side of the ball where the name is still there, the respect is still there, but the production just is not. And it's going to be tough sledding next week for the Steelers, presumably starting Trubisky against the Ravens.
Yep, indeed. Dameon Pierce still can't get going. 24 for 81, 3.4 yards per carry, long of 13. Did have a 27-yard reception, so that helps. But that we're hoping we haven't had close to a big day from him on the ground yet.
Not yet. And it's like this would be kind of the script for that to happen, right? When you're up big and just kind of running out the clock. And Pittsburgh's not necessarily the team to do that against, but I think basically this was his most productive game of the year, which is saying a lot. For as fun as this Texans passing offense has been, for as great as CJ Stroud has looked, it has not trickled down to Dameon Pierce having more room whatsoever. He did have 1 catch for 27 yards, but I mean, I'd be looking to get off Dameon Pierce if I can. I mean, it's a tough time to sell for certain, but I think there's going to be a lot more like 13 carry, 39-yard weeks in his future.
Yeah, I think so too. So before we move on to the next game, here's a quick note from our Blue Wire sponsors. We are on the Blue Wire Network. We're happy to be on the Blue Wire Network. So thank you for your indulgence in hearing their ads. All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got a lot still to cover. Let's hit up Minnesota, Carolina. Maybe not a lot to cover in this game. This was a snoozer of a game.
Yeah, Vikings very lucky to escape here. They finally get their first win. They are now 1-3. But really, a lot of the metrics would push you toward Carolina, and part of it was just some fluky plays. Minnesota gets down basically to the 1 yard line on the first drive of the game, 99-yard pick six. They end up punting on 2 of their next 3 possessions. Did sneak a touchdown in there as well. Kirk Cousins threw another really bad interception that was tipped right towards the end of halftime, or right before halftime, I should say. It looked like Minnesota at that point was at the very least going to get a field goal, if not a touchdown. So 2 just backbreaking plays. That first pick by Cousins was awful. I don't know what, just throwing all the way across the field, like just an easy pick for the defender, and really nobody
He threw
there
that on
to
faith. I know he's a faithful guy and all that, but
he is a God
he was
guy.
going to be open. They thought that there was essentially a pick play, and he thought that they didn't see it coming and thought it'd be back shoulder. Instead, he's like, "I'm ready. Let's go." And Cousins got blasted, by the way, on the interception return too.
After sprinting like 85 yards.
I appreciate the effort
at the end of it. Yeah.
But
there are just a lot of short drives in this game. You look at the second half, it's just kind of teams trading 3 and outs, 4 and outs. The big swing play that really kind of opened this up for Minnesota was the Wyndham sack fumble. I think it was Harrison Smith on the sack, and then Wyndham brings it back for about a 50-yard touchdown. We are now 4 weeks into the season. Carolina has not put up 300 yards of total offense in a game yet. I actually thought Bryce Young looked okay in this one. I mean, it certainly didn't kill them. 25 of 32 for 204 yards. You're not seeing the wow plays that you are with CJ Stroud, or even in a different way, Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, agreed. I think they would have been better with Andy Dalton yesterday. Maybe not evading the pass rush, but at least getting plenty of time, getting rid of the ball quicker. They were driving on that play, and he had a couple of scrambles, and that was great. That kind of got them in on that drive, but the pass rush really got dialed up. Young almost threw a pick six to the same guy that got the fumble 6 touchdown.
He did.
It was a deflection at the line. It just, I don't know. Wanham, yeah, that's it. It's listed as a pass defense. It was nearly a pick 6, but the Carolina offensive line is really bad. I think that's my big takeaway from all of this here. They can't protect Young, and they're not opening up holes. Miles Sanders 13 for 19, albeit on a sore groin. Chuba Hubbard carried him 14 for 41, but that's 2.9 yards per carry. It's hard to get, and this is against Minnesota, who is not good. Not good defending the run. We saw, some of that, of course, is Philly on that Thursday night game, just driving bus-size holes through their run defense. But still, this is not a great run defense, and Carolina couldn't do anything in that respect. Justin Jefferson could have had 3 touchdowns, had 1 called back after he really stepped out of the back of the end zone before catching it. I mean, I shouldn't say it was ruled. He did step out of the back of the end zone before that. He got caught doing so. And that was it in the passing game. And Cousins couldn't get anybody else going. Only 139 passing yards in this game. Hawkinson had 1 big catch and run called back due to a penalty. And then they ran the same exact play on that drive. That was the drive before halftime where the tip pass ended it there. But they didn't unlock Hawkinson, only 3 targets. Madison Madison got going on the running game early on. Jordan Addison only had 1 target, had another one where he drew a 45-yard PI, which is why they were down at the 1 in the first place on that first drive. But they didn't get him going that much. It's a very weird game.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota only ran, I think, like 11 real plays in the second half. Obviously, they got the ball back late and ran out the clock, but only 11 meaningful plays in the second half. They only had 1 third down conversion on the entire day. I mean, really not a game that Minnesota deserved to win, in my opinion. I think with Carolina getting the pick 6, if they didn't give it back with that fumble 6, it's probably a game that they have a good chance to hang on and win. But there's just not a lot of optimism. Like Carolina is another one of those teams, kind of like Jacksonville, where everything looks difficult. It feels like a monumental achievement to like pick up 10 yards on a 3rd and 9. And part of that is the playmaking. Part of that's a rookie quarterback, but there's just something's not clicking here, because I still believe in this defense. I think they've actually played pretty well. I'm not saying it's a dominant unit. Might not be a top 10 unit, but it's in that conversation. So the Panthers, like, we've seen a lot of bad teams with rookie quarterbacks over the years. The Panthers are 0-4 I still don't feel like they're a terrible team. Like they're putting in a good effort every week. They're just kind of finding ways to lose.
Terrible offensive line, though. Bottom 3 offensive line.
Really bad.
And
5 more sacks today. For
number
Bryce
1
Young.
overall pick, and you can't protect him. Seems like a bad formula to me. All right, let's talk a little Rams and Colts, because this was more of a refreshing game. I enjoyed this game, actually.
Yeah, the Rams have actually, to me, not been a fun team to watch the last few years, partially because of the injuries and like some of the talent drain after the Super Bowl. But they've become really fun. Like Matthew Stafford is, I mean, I kind of regret not betting him to lead the league in interceptions, because he'll make any throw. Like there's not a single throw that he'll say like, oh yeah, you think I can't make this? Boom. Got picked once in this game, kind of helped the Colts. I mean, this one was over. It was 23-0 LA Rams early in the third quarter. And Indy had just done nothing at that point. All of a sudden they scored, they get the 2-point, and they score again. And you're like, oh, what the heck? This is a 1-score game. Like I was watching this one mostly on Red Zone, and like I don't know if Scott Hansen was just too busy paying attention to other games, but like it's an 8-point game, and he's like, well, the Colts are just trying to make this one respectable. And he's like, wait a second, this is a 1-score game. And that's kind of exactly how I felt. Like the whole day I had just talked this up to, all right, well, the Rams are going to win this one. Don't have to worry about that for pick'em. Don't have to worry about it for bets, whatever. The hay is in the barn. And it goes to overtime. The Rams put together a really nice 8-play, 75-yard drive. Puka Nacua fittingly finishes that off by falling into the end zone. He was back in a big way. 9 catches on 10 targets for 163 and that score. Kyron Williams up to his old tricks. He scored the first 2 touchdowns of the game, had a big day on the ground. We saw a little Ronnie Rivers as well, carried the ball 9 times. Pretty similar split as the last couple of weeks for the Colts. Obviously, with Richardson back, he ran the ball 10 times, but it was pretty much all Zach Moss when they handed it off. We did see a couple snaps for Trey Sermon.
Yeah, we did. Taylor could be practicing this week, though.
The practice window can be open. It's a matter of, does he want to be open?
I'm getting my gut is telling me he's going to be back. Because I think he sees that, okay, Zach Moss is actually playing well. I better get back. I don't know. That's my lean. And the longer you're out, the longer it takes to come back, I feel like too. So we'll see. He probably won't play this week. I'd be surprised if he did, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is practicing this week.
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I know the Colts earlier today, Shane Steichen said that he's not going to rule out Taylor playing next weekend. So obviously he would need to practice this week. And I stand corrected. 2 minutes ago, the Colts just tweeted from their official account, per coach Shane Steichen, Jonathan Taylor will return to practice Wednesday. So there we go.
There you go. Indeed. Big news as far as that goes. Other notes from this game, Michael Pittman, only 1 catch. He had 5 targets. The Anthony Richardson experience is fun. We saw Pittman live through, has been kind of getting the alpha treatment all season long until this week. Only 5 targets. And some of that is you got a quarterback that's just not just willing to pull it down, but is looking for reasons to pull it down and run. And that's going to hurt all the receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were at least bracing for this coming into the year. I don't recall talking to anybody who was like super high on any Colts pass catchers. We saw Richardson like really spreading it around to like the depth pieces at tight end. So if you started Drew Ogletree this week, congratulations. If you started Mo Alley Cox, congratulations. They'll be getting Jelani Woods back soon as well. I think as early as this coming week, he could be off of IR. So there's just another like random tight end to throw into the mix here. But I continue to be impressed by Richardson, man. I mean, the lows are low, right? I mean, he's 11 of 25 throwing the ball in this game. You're not going to say everything was great, but the way that he picks his spots when he runs is really impressive. Like there are some rookie quarterbacks who are just chaotic when they're out there. I think we saw that with Justin Fields as a rookie. We continue to see it with him now. But Richardson, despite kind of being this run first guy, like he's smart about it. He's super smooth. There's kind of a quiet confidence with the way he commands this team. I mean, even after falling behind 23-0, you never really felt like he was pressing.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. And I mean, I got to say, I mean, the touchdown to the second touchdown to Ali Cox, that was a sweet play. I mean, I got to give him credit for that. I mean, yes, they're bringing back Dallas Clark, so she can have like 6 tight ends on the roster, I think. But nonetheless, I mean, yeah, it does hurt the wideouts a little bit there. But then again, I mean, if it's working for them, 10 for 56, did lose a fumble. And that was one of the themes of the NFL this week, I felt like. Young players not realizing that there's like every player on the field can strip it from you. It's not just that one guy you have to worry about.
Yeah, sometimes you could just see those fumbles coming, right? Like
Yep.
you see a linebacker trailing the play, and they got their arm out, ready to make that slap at the football,
Yep.
and
They're like that.
yeah,
Yep.
lost one near the end of the first quarter. At that point, it was already 14-0. That led directly to a field goal to make it 17-0. But yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say on this game. I mean, neither of these teams. I guess the Rams are interesting for fantasy. The Colts not so much. Although with Taylor coming back, that's an entirely different discussion. But I just think you gotta hand it to the Colts for rallying back. I mean, this to me felt like okay, all right, maybe this team played a little bit above its level the last couple of weeks. They're kind of going through the typical rookie quarterback, kind of down part of the ups and downs. But to even make this an overtime game, even after you end up losing, I think feels like somewhat of a minor victory.
Indeed. Indeed, it does. A major victory was by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into the Saints, going to New Orleans and beating the Saints, beating them handily 26-9.
Really frustrating game if you're a New Orleans fan. I mean, this offense has looked pretty bad for
Ugh.
most of 4 games. This was their magnum opus. I'll tell you that. I mean, they're 2-2, and they have not scored more than 20 points in a game this season. It's been 16, 20, 17, 9 through 4 games. I don't really think they were all that much better off with Derek Carr playing this week. Credit to him for pushing through whatever he's going through with the shoulder, but 23 completions for 127 yards. Alvin Kamara like shattered the NFL record for fewest yards with to number of catches ratio. I think the previous record was like 13 catches for like 75 yards. He had 13 for 33 yards, which is almost impossible when you just think about like how that happens. But yeah, I mean, it was just a day where New Orleans couldn't do anything. Like their one big break came just before half, where Tampa Bay had drove all the way into the red zone. I think it was Isaac Yadam grabbed a pick in the end zone, and then they had to try to kind of get away from the goal line. They hand the ball to their fullback, who immediately fumbles, and 2 plays later, Tampa Bay gets the touchdown anyway. So
Yep.
that to me, like once Tampa Bay punched that in, it was 14-3. Tampa Bay gets the ball to begin the second half. You just kind of felt like the way this New Orleans offense is operating right now, like coming back from an 11-point deficit, it just seems impossible. Like they at no point did they ever really threaten to win this game.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe, just maybe they were signaling that they were going to check down to Kamara almost every play. By the way, biggest argument, Kamara's day is like a perfect argument against PPR leagues, right? He
Yeah,
had a combined 84 yards. He should have about, okay, maybe he should have 10 to 12 points. No, he had 13 points just on receptions alone. Plus he ended up with a 23-point day. It's like as if he
yeah.
had 2 touchdowns or something like that. It's just, I can hear Andy Barron's turning over in his grave, and I love you, Andy. I'm just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Andy is a big anti PPR guy, and this is games like this are why. So
Yep.
yeah, it was pretty awful. Plus, it killed Chris Olave. Just absolutely killed him this week. One
Yeah.
catch for 4 yards, 6 targets. But come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Worst game of Olave's career. Not really his fault. Just Derek Carr being Derek Carr, Dennis Allen being Dennis Allen. This has been a very unimaginative Saints offense to begin the year. Final note on the Bucks: Mike Evans left this game early with a hamstring. Was kind of trying to get it loose. He's riding the bike on the sidelines. Ended up, kind of calling it and deciding that he couldn't go back in. So that led to a nice game for Chris Godwin, 8 for 114. But got to monitor Mike Evans very, very closely now over these next couple of weeks. Although the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are off this week, so I guess if there's a good time to tweak your hamstring, it's right before the bye.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect timing there. Yeah. Kate Otten got in the end zone, just frustrating everybody that streamed him last week for the Eagles game. And now he does it in a game where New Orleans is supposed to be awesome against tight ends. So, of course, Otten scores. But he only went 3 for 16. So, he really can't count too much on that. All right. One of the best games in the early slate, maybe the best game in the early slate, was Washington and Philly. And it's kind of surprisingly so.
Yeah, it was. I was on Philly in Circa Million. Obviously, we did not win that. We kind of felt like early in the second half that was down the drain. Like Philly looked so good against Tampa last week, especially with the offensive line. And you're thinking, okay, maybe you can't expect 10-foot holes every single week, but if they could do 75% of what they were doing last week, they're going to be fine against a Commanders defense that has not been as good in real life as we thought it would be on paper. But Philly really struggled to run the ball in this game. DeAndre Swift, 14 for 56. No explosive runs on the day whatsoever. Jalen Hurts was the only player that had a run longer than 13 yards. That came in a scramble situation. But really, to me, the Philadelphia defense, I don't think showed up either. I mean, I think if you told the Eagles, hey, you're going to put up 34, Jalen Hurts is going to throw for 300 plus, AJ Brown's going to have a massive day, Devontae Smith's going to have a good day as well, you would think, okay, we win that game pretty comfortably. But Philly just could not get stopped. We saw time and time again. Washington converted 10 third and fourth downs. Philly had like 4 opportunities to end this game late before it even went to overtime, and just kept allowing conversions. Finally allowed a touchdown on the final play of regulation. So Philly, I think in some ways lucky to be 4-0. This game, it felt like was maybe a slight step back when it felt like they were becoming the team that we thought they could be a week ago. But nonetheless, I mean, good teams find ways to win these games, and I still think Philly is one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL.
This is kind of like, I guess in retrospect, it's not like, it's kind of foreseeable. Washington's a divisional game, right? Was it last year or 2 years ago where it was last year.
It was last year when they lost straight up
on Monday night, right?
Yeah. Yep. That was last year
in Philly again.
Yep.
No, or was it in Washington? I forget. It might have actually been in DC. But point is, there's some familiarity. There was some luck involved here too. Terry McLaurin falls on Robinson's fumble in the end zone, for instance. I mean, that's a pretty lucky play. That the fact that Washington didn't turn over the ball, they put the ball on the ground twice. Antonio Gibson at least had the decency to recover his own fumble this time. So, that good baby steps in the right direction for him. Howell got sacked 5 times, including 1 in overtime. That was a big play. They kind of stepped up at the key moment there. But yeah, I kind of view this as Philly's still awesome. It was the fact that it was so close and that they were behind and danger of being a survivor victim is hey, the fact that they rallied from that is impressive still when they couldn't do the things that normally work. I think they'll totally be fine. They're going to lose at some point this season, but that was they got by without their A game. And I think that's a sign of a good team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, because I think probably 28 other teams in the NFL lose this game. But Philly, has the infrastructure, has the trust in that offense, and really the trust in that defense, I think, to step up when it really matters. So yeah, I mean, this felt like, I think offensively they played pretty well. I would say it's like a B+ game, maybe A- game offensively. It was like a C- game for the defense. And yeah, like I said, most teams in those situations will end up losing this game, because the Commanders played really well. I think Washington played about as well as they could have against this Eagles defense. Sam Howell made some huge throws. I mean, they had just some, unbelievable like balls that were just about to hit the ground, or, defender, if he has 2 more inches on his reach, it gets knocked away. I mean, a lot of things went the Commanders' way today. And yeah, if you're the Eagles to still come out with a win here, you're feeling pretty good. So they are now 4-0. They're on the road at the Rams this week. Then they're at the Jets, home for the Dolphins. So fun little stretch here for the Philadelphia Eagles.
And meanwhile, the Commanders, we get to reprise greatness. We get Bears Commanders on Thursday night again.
I know. I was kind of hoping we wouldn't mention that. I mean, if you're the Commanders, you're feeling pretty good about that, right? I don't want to check the line yet. That is going to be in Washington. And, Chicago, I guess, found some momentum last week, but I feel like the way you lose that game, you almost come out more demoralized.
Yeah, exactly right. That'll be one for the ages. Hopefully our live look-in success will be a little bit better on that one there. Before we hit up the the afternoon slate, let's talk about that. We mentioned Circa. Well, guess what? It's football season at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143 diagonal screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football, playing every game from college to the pros. Catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options, including everything from cozy day beds to private temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino, is open 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. Book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. I am in Circa Survivor. I went with the chalk this week. I went with the Niners, which pretty much locks me into Philly on Christmas Day. But the rest of the league did so too. I think after last week's calamity, I think a lot more people were eager to go ahead and get the go ahead and take the chalk. I think they were like 49% used in Circa Survivor. I know at officefootballspools.com it was only like 30%. So you could kind of see, I think there was a strong reaction to last week's results.
Yeah, no question about that. And first of all, before we dive in on these late games, I want to issue an apology to the people watching live as I'm like sweating like crazy. Our air conditioning went out
Oh no,
over the weekend, and we're like, oh, it's October,
it's
perfect. What
Wisconsin.
what a good
We're
time for that
fine.
to go out. And all of a sudden, it's like 85 degrees here,
Oh,
and I'm dying. I could actually use one of those temperature controlled cabanas at Circa right about now. So we're gonna power through the rest of the podcast. But if I'm getting like progressively sweatier, that is why. It's not because I'm upset with the Jaguars offense or anything. But you want to start Arizona, San Francisco?
sure, but I'll just say I'll make a movie reference that you won't get and say that
Okay.
you're Albert Brooks on this here. I know you haven't seen that
I'm
movie.
gonna
So
Google who that is.
yes,
That
yes, exactly.
is. Oh, is he? Oh, he's an actor. That's not the character name.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's a network. I think I believe it's Network News. He and Holly Hunter win that movie. And
Broadcast news.
broadcast news, and he's
There we
like
go.
sweating profusely on a broadcast. So that was the reference I was going for there.
Oh man. All right. Well, I got the windows open now, so we at least we got some movement. My neighbor was mowing the lawn earlier. I was like, this is
Oh,
just a worst case
what a
scenario. My
disaster.
office was becoming a sauna. Anyway, Cardinals Niners. Tough luck here for those of us who were on Arizona plus 14. They I thought played a pretty good game. You can only say so much about a team that puts up 16 points, but I mean, San Francisco to me has no doubt been the best team in the league, the most bulletproof team in the league on all sides of the ball. And you kind of still feel like this Arizona bubble is going to pop at some point. At least I do. And they go and beat Dallas straight up, on the road last week, or excuse me, at home last week, and then you got to go to San Francisco, and you're thinking, all right, this is the week where everything falls off. Yes, they end up losing this game, by multiple scores, but I really like the effort that Arizona put in here. I continue to be really impressed by Joshua
Same.
Dobbs. I think they just got like slowly bled out by a San Francisco team that does this to just about everyone. But I thought Arizona kind of stuck to its guns and for the most part ran a lot of the same things that have had success for them over the previous 3 weeks.
I thought this game had three phases. There was the Niners running out quickly, 21-3. Arizona keeping their feet under them, getting that drive before halftime to get to 21-10. Got it to 21-16 even. If they get that 2-point conversion, all of a sudden they're within a field goal.
Right.
And then McCaffrey came back and took back over in the fourth quarter again. Pity the fool that was going up against Christian McCaffrey. He almost had 5 touchdowns in this one. The play calling in that last drive is like, okay, let's have some mercy on the people going against CMC. They did a fullback dive and then the quarterback sneak for the touchdown there. I was like, thank you. Thank you, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think the Niners franchise record was 5. So, they mentioned on the telecast, like, well, Shanahan's aware of it. Maybe they'll give him a chance at it. And ultimately, I think they were planning for Juszczyk to get that touchdown. He fell about like 2 millimeters short. And then Purdy was able to push it in. Hell of a game for Brock Purdy, 20 for 21, 283 yards and a touchdown. I continue to see people, just kind of implying that he's a system guy. I get it. I don't think he would look this good anywhere else, but I'm just really impressed, man. Week after week after week. Like, he makes pretty much every throw he needs to. Brandon Ayuk returned in a huge way. I mean, we saw George Kittle and Deebo Samuel were just not even a part of this game. Like, neither of those guys made an impact whatsoever. It was all Ayuk and it was all McCaffrey. Brandon Ayuk, excuse me, had 6 catches that went for double-digit yardage, 4 of those for at least 20 yards. It felt like they kind of hit him on the same play like 3 times where he's coming all the way across the field. Really nice kind of left to right throw from Brock Purdy. One of those was just an incredibly acrobatic kind of in traffic catch by Ayuk, who, this is like 3 straight years now. It feels like he's come back and just he's become an incrementally better player each year.
Yeah, exactly right. And, I think he's a free agent this offseason. It's going to be interesting to see if he gets paid by the Niners somehow, but I doubt they can because of just the contract they just paid out to Bosa, or where he lands otherwise, because he's a stud. Deebo came into this game as a game time decision, so that kind of explains a little bit of the lack of targets in this one. But Kittle, I mean, Kittle is frustrating because, you paid a premium price to get a top 5 tight end. He got 1 target.
Yeah, he's tight end 12 right now on the year, and that comes with, he had 1.9 fantasy points this past week. He had 6 fantasy points in week 2. He had 4.9 fantasy points in week 1. So, I mean, you're lucky that he's tight end 12 at this point. If nothing else, I think that says more about the state of the position than George Kittle. He's been a huge disappointment.
He has looked great against the Giants, but that's about it so far. I think good days are coming. It's kind of funny though. The narrative was Brock Purdy unlocked Kittle again,
right?
And now he's back to being locked up again. Arizona side, I'm really impressed with Michael Wilson. How can you not be? 2 touchdowns,
Yep.
just balling out there.
Yeah, he's a Stanford guy. I saw a note that McCaffrey and Wilson accounted for the first 6 touchdowns of this game, so that was just all Stanford to begin this one. Yeah, Hollywood Brown, I think, has actually had a better early season than I expected. Like he had a couple really nice catches in this game. They're still looking for him pretty consistently. 10 targets. Michael Wilson, I think, is still going to be out there on a lot of waiver wires and shallow leagues, so make sure you go pick him up this week. Again, unless we get some sort of crazy injury in the Monday night slate, I think it's going to be one of those weeks where you're working the margins. And again, if you're in a Yahoo league, if you're in an ESPN league with your friends, there's a pretty good chance you can steal Michael Wilson away.
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row, he's been productive. In the online championship, RotoWire online championship, the NFFC 72% roster. So even in the 20-man rostered leagues, he's available in some leagues. Primetime 75% rostered. So if you do see him in one of those leagues, keep in mind talent is so thin. Yep. Be prepared to spend triple digits on him. And it'll be worth it, I feel like, too. I would do it. You add talent when you can find it. And I feel like that's a kind of a leak in my game, is that I'm not aggressive enough on the waiver wire in football leagues. It's a shorter season, and especially the deeper the league, the harder it is to find a difference maker. Go get him if you can. That's about all I got to say about Arizona. Just keep in mind they're going to be with Dobbs for a while. Kyler Murray's not coming off IR anytime soon. Kudos to the Cardinals for actually trading for Dobbs, actually, because he
looks good, man.
A lot of teams would be happy with that performance. Although the Jets finally got something out of Zach Wilson, which we'll hit up in a bit here. But I was going to make the observation: how different would the narrative be if the Jets had just traded for Dobbs and had him as their next in line behind Wilson? I mean, they could have actually used him instead of Wilson, as opposed to like Trevor Siemian, who they can't use. He's not good enough.
I wish he was on the Falcons. I know I threw out last week kind of as a joke that Justin Fields should be the Falcons quarterback, but Josh Dobbs, I think, would give them about what they're looking for right now.
Yeah, that's right. Let's move on to Chargers and the Raiders. Another quarterback making his first start in Aiden O'Connell. Another baptism by fire. Wait, I just think Khalil Mack sacked him again.
What a kind of reintroduction by Khalil Mack, who I think it was just last week on the show we were saying, yeah, he might be done. His days as an impact player, I think they might be over. He goes off for 6 sacks in this game.
Yep. His first 10
total tackles. Yeah, four QB hits on top of that. I mean, this was just a one-man domination. You almost forgot that Joey Bosa was not active, which to me makes it even more impressive, right? I mean, not having that guy you need to pay all this attention to on the other side. Basically 5 plays into this game, you knew Khalil Mack was going to be the guy that was going to wreck it for the Chargers. And, the Raiders were sending extra guys. They were kind of trying to do what they could. And it didn't matter. I mean, there were a couple of these sacks where Khalil Mack was starting like a yard or two behind the line of scrimmage where you would normally line up and just getting a running start. And it was just, you felt bad for the Raiders right tackle. I don't even know what his name is. He probably doesn't want us to be talking about him on this pod, but I mean, he had no chance. He had absolutely no chance. Like a lot of these were just straight bull rushes by Khalil Mack. And, Aiden O'Connell, you got an inexperienced quarterback who I thought, given the circumstances, actually looked okay, but was just not elusive in the pocket. Sometimes it was just the pocket kind of engulfing him like a volcano. He gets sacked 7 times on the day, lost 50 yards total on those sacks. And yet, with Khalil Mack dominating this game, with the Chargers defense looking pretty good, a rookie quarterback for the Raiders, this is one where for the second straight week, the Chargers were extremely lucky to escape.
The chargering was fierce, but so was the raidering. And that ultimately proved to be overwhelming. But for the second week in a row, the Chargers failed on a short 4th down play. Herbert trying to do a QB sneak with a bad left hand. I mean, I don't question going for it. I question the play call. I think that was a horrible, no good, awful play call when you got a guy that's got a bandaged left hand.
He could barely hold the ball. Like we saw Justin Herbert convert a 4th and short earlier in the game where he went up and over and reached the ball out
on the goal line.
He couldn't even grip the ball. Like I thought that was insane, an absolutely insane call. Like you don't want, let alone grip the ball, you don't want any contact to that hand. And obviously Justin Herbert's not going to carry the ball one-handed on a QB sneak. I just thought that was insane.
Well,
if you want to hand it off there, fine.
Yeah, all this is a product of Austin Eckler being hurt. Because he's their go-to on these situations. Josh Kelly has failed on short yardage situations numerous times. It's just when they know it's coming, he can't beat it.
Right.
That's all there is to it. He's a fine back when he's a change of pace guy, when they don't know it's coming to him, but he's not a alpha. And that all their short yards problems stem from that they don't have Eckler out there.
Yeah, a couple other notes from this game. I mean, the Chargers defense was fantastic for most of the first half. I mean, they were creating turnovers, they were forcing 3 and outs. I mean, the Raiders couldn't really do anything. And then all of a sudden in the second half, they were just walking up and down the field, down 24-10 early in the fourth quarter. They had a 1st and 10 from the Chargers 18-yard line. Less than 2 minutes later, that was a 4th and 30 from the Chargers 38. So there's a sack in there. There's a penalty as well. I think that was a crackback block on Jacoby Myers. That was a questionable one. But we also had the insane Jerry Tillery play. I'm sure you saw that. That was as bad of a late hit as I think I've ever seen. Like, he didn't even get, the entire Chargers team kind of mobbed him. Obviously he played for the Chargers in the past, and you didn't really see anybody come into his defense. He walked over to the sideline. He ended up getting ejected. Normally you'll see players come over, give him a slap on the back, give him a high five. I mean, I think both teams were like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah. Insane play. Absolutely insane play.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, that was you just don't see that anymore.
Yeah. The ultimate deciding pick, this was Rushman brings this up. Why did they throw at the 3 when Jacobs, was getting hot?
And there was enough time where you're not worried about, the clock running.
Yeah. The Chargers almost blew that, even though too, Asante Samuel didn't have to go down. He might have gone pick 6 there, and it was like 2.5 minutes left. There's like too much time left to do that.
Way too much time. And I mean, the Chargers, obviously they end up running the clock out, but it took a 40-yard bomb from one-handed Justin Herbert to like a fingertip catch by Josh Palmer on the sideline just to get it to that point. I mean, the Chargers were, not only should Asante Samuel have not gone down, I think he just thought there was like 30 seconds left instead of 2.5 minutes. I mean, they were very close to punting the ball back to the Raiders with like a minute and 45 on the clock, which the way they were moving the ball at that point, felt like at least a 50% chance to score for what would have been good field position. So insane throw by Justin Herbert to seal this game, but it's only the Chargers where it comes down to that.
Exactly. By the way, keep an eye on Herbert. He was able to kind of gut it out the rest of the way, but we've seen before opposite hand injuries. You can't get the snap properly. If he's got to have a big ass cast on his hand, that means the shotgun snap is even going to be difficult for him. Let alone just a snap from under center. Easton Stick is your backup quarterback there.
Well, we saw, when after they converted that long 3rd down to seal the game, he was taking the kneel down snaps in shotgun. So I think that tells you where the finger's at. I mean, the good thing is the Chargers are on bye this week, so you got an extra week for that hand to recover. But if it's a fractured finger, which I believe it is, and they said there was some damage to the nail and the skin, like even with a bye week, it's like, it's good that you're not playing next week, but it's still something that could be affecting you 2 weeks from now. And next 2 games for the Chargers: home for the Cowboys, at the Chiefs.
These are huge games, huge games. So the bye couldn't have been better timed. That's for sure. Second team in a row with that. Tampa's also with the Mike Evans thing there. All right, Dallas and the Patriots.
Pass.
Okay. Mac Jones is making Zach Wilson look good. He's the lack of awareness on that strip sack fumble TD. I mean, you got to get rid of the ball. Just got to get rid of it. The interception was terrible. The pick 6 was terrible. He almost got picked on another play where he probably should have been. Two interceptions total. I mean, the Pats are just, this is a really, this is a bad team. Not just a tough team to watch, but a bad team.
Yeah, I mean, EPA says they're the worst offense in the NFL, and I think that the eye test would back that up for the most part. I mean, their passing offense is a disaster. At times they can run the ball, but they just have no big playability, right? It's like they can get you, Stevenson could get you 4 or 5 yards, but you're never thinking, he's going to burst through and rip this one for 35. It's like just them picking up more than 5 yards on any play is like the equivalent of a 20-yard gain for another team. Like, they just have no explosion. Everybody looks like they're like 10% slower than the rest of the league. This defense lost Matthew Judon to what they think is at least partial tear of the biceps. If that's the case, I mean, this could be season ending. That's a really difficult injury. I mean, that's something that you see, with defensive linemen more than any other position. And it's definitely not a week to week type of thing. So I think we're going to be without Matt Judon for several weeks at minimum. Yeah, everything's moving in the wrong direction, man. We talked on the show last week about, this Bill Belichick mystique. And, there's kind of this logic of, well, if you're playing the Patriots, Bill Belichick, he'll have something ready. I don't know, man. I know that the talent discrepancy here is big, but we just saw the Dallas Cowboys lose straight up to the Arizona Cardinals. And I mean, this was just never close. New England was never competitive. Bailey Zappi came in at the end, didn't look any better than Mac Jones. Like, I don't know what the path is for New England. I don't know what the path forward is. The ugliest game of the year might be coming at us next week against the Saints.
Yeah, and they've had 2 uglies in a row. They won against the Jets, but it was ugly. Totally unwatchable game. What's your panic level on Ramondre Stevenson right now?
Pretty high, I guess,
Yeah.
especially relative to where you took him and what your expectations were. Like someone like him struggling like he has, to me, is more surprising and more concerning than Dameon Pierce. I think it's pretty easy to look back and be like, yeah, all right, I think that makes sense. It is the Texans. But yeah, I mean, Stevenson, I think that the saving grace is like they're not going away from him, right? There's some other situations where you'll see teams just kind of abandon the run. Like he's had a minimum of 12 carries in every game. He's had 14 in each of the last 3. But he's just, again, his longest run of the season is 12 yards, Jeff. He has 2 carries that have gone for longer than 8 yards on the season. And if the receptions aren't there, which like week 1, 12 carries, 25 yards, that's terrible against Philly, but he had 6 catches for 64 yards. The last 2 weeks combined, he only has 3 catches. Like if that's not there, then it's absolutely full on panic.
Yeah, it is. And, draft capital, you spent a 3rd round pick on Stevenson. You didn't, at least with Pierce, he's like a 6th or 7th round pick.
Exactly.
You had your doubts about him, that he's not like, yeah, it sucks when he's not good, but it shouldn't be like devastating to your team. I've got a league where I took him in the 3rd round, could have taken an elite quarterback, could have taken a lot of different things there. That's the RotoWire Joke Strap League, and I'm getting housed in that league this week. Greg Wilson's going to come on our show tomorrow, by the way, and he's going to be on full on character roasting me, so be prepared for that. But it's a fun league, and he's a funny guy, so it'll be a fun segment. But man, it sucks right now. I've got Stevenson. I lost J.K. Dobbins in that league, and I don't have an elite quarterback. Like the whole point is like I should be like getting, okay, if I'm struggling with these running backs, at least I got an elite passing game. No, I've got that. I've got Jamar Chase suffering through the Bengals passing game. I mean, it's just a nightmare situation here going on. And so my panic level on Stevenson's 9 out of 10 right now. It's really high.
I think that's fair for a team that has a pretty difficult schedule in division. It's like you scroll through and they do play the Raiders in a couple of weeks. Like that could be a spot where he gets back on track. But like even like a matchup against the Colts, like that defense has looked better than we expect. And I think by later in the season, teams like the Giants and the Steelers, they'll have it together. They do get the Broncos late in the year, but I mean, we're talking like December at this point. So it's not really a great schedule where you can kind of pick out 2 or 3 games where you say, all right, he'll get back on track here. I don't think that's really going to be in the cards. Should we finish out Chiefs Jets? I think that's our only game left, right?
Before we do that, here's a Taylor Swift reference by Mike Tirico. No, I'm sorry. Wait, here's a flag. No. Okay, let's talk about the actual game.
Please. I thought NBC putting together that full like 5-minute trailer for Taylor Swift attending a football game was strange. That was like, it just kind of felt a little dystopian in some ways. But I also saw a bunch of clips on like Twitter and TikTok of just regular people watching the game, and then their like 8-year-old daughters going nuts because Taylor Swift was there. So like I think there is real data that I think it's real. I don't think this is just like a made for TV thing. I think people really do care about this, maybe even if we don't. Very strange game. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had 2 of the worst passes of his career, I would say, like 2 of like the 10 worst throws he's ever made. And both of those resulted in picks, just 2 weird underthrows. You can see what he was going for. Just did not have the normal Mahomes touch. Prior to that, the Chiefs have been rolling. And, the safety by Jawan Taylor, who's been a complete disaster. I didn't really love the Jags, just kind of giving him away, letting him walk in free agency, but he has, done more harm than good for the Chiefs so far in the season. So it goes from 17-0 to 17-2. Then there's the pick that turns into a touchdown. The Jets had a chance to tack a field goal on. They missed that before the half. And then Mahomes throws another pick. So ultimately, you thought the Chiefs were on their way to just embarrassing the Jets. You could kind of start to feel like it was a little uncomfortable, those first few Jets drives, like knowing that everybody in the building absolutely hates Zach Wilson and does not believe he should be the quarterback. I was like, man, they're like one more 3 and out away from this getting really ugly and the crowd kind of fully turning on national TV. And then the unthinkable happened, and Zach Wilson played the best 2.5 quarters that we've seen from him in his career.
Yeah. By the way, I can attest to the Taylor Swift thing being real. My daughter that's in college
Yeah.
was texting me about this. That she goes, "Did you see that they're dating?" And she's at all the games. How do you feel about that? Are you a Swiftie now? I'm like, okay. So and she's like, I'm gonna root for the Chiefs now. Yeah. And my
Yeah.
younger daughter, Erin, she's still a true Bengals fan with me here.
Good.
But
Good.
Allie is not a football fan at all. And she's telling me how Braxton Berrios is dating this influencer and all this. And she's informing me of that. Like, oh,
Sure.
sending me football TikTok videos and all that.
Okay.
So the
All right.
Swift
Well, we'll have to
effect
get her on
is
the pod.
real. I can attest to that. Yeah, back to the game though. It's a shame Wilson's day ended on that fumble because he was having such a good game. He is playing so well. I'd love to pile on him like anybody else, but man, he played well in that game. Some of those throws, the Lazard touchdown throw, it's awesome. He threw these back shoulder throws to Ty Conklin for crying out loud that were just like lasers. Like this is why he got drafted second overall. You can see talent finally. But yeah, ends like that. Yeah, you mentioned Taylor. That was the Juwan Taylor. That's just it's just so bad. By the way, that wasn't a safety. It should have been like down at the
I agree.
1 yard line. For all the complaining about the calls at the end, and they were bad, the Chiefs got screwed twice. The horse collar that wasn't, and the safety call that wasn't.
Yeah, it was funny because you could tell like Chris Collinsworth definitely knew it wasn't a safety and was like trying to get there by being like the nice guy with the rules analyst, whoever it was. And there was just so much confusion. Yeah, Terry McCauley. That was just a very convoluted segment that I believe just ended with Collinsworth saying, "Well, okay then," essentially being like, "You're wrong," because it was very clear to me that the contact with that face mask started like at least a yard outside of the end zone. I guess if you want to say he didn't twist it until he was in the end zone, whatever. I don't know. That was just a weird call in general. It felt like one where like the crowd kind of realized what was happening, and then the refs were like, "Yeah, might as well. Let's make it a safety. Sure, that'd be a little more interesting."
Look where they are. They're in the end zone right now. I mean, I could see that. How can that not be looked at? I mean, it's a scoring play, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Aren't all scoring plays reviewed?
They should be. They should be. I mean, especially if it's called a safety on the field, right? I think if it had been the other way around, then you couldn't review it, right? So because it was called a scoring play, then it should be. So yeah, that was a strange one. They moved very quickly on that. All of a sudden, the safety punt happened and we had moved on. But either way, I don't know if that affected the bottom line. I mean, Mahomes just kind of losing his mind for a couple possessions is really what kind of took the Chiefs out of this because they were rolling early in the game. I mean, they were just putting up yardage at will. Isaiah Pacheco had one of the best games of his career so far. I saw a stat from NFL Next Gen that first touchdown run that he had that went for, I think it was 48 yards. That went 39 yards over expectation. It had a 0.5% chance of turning into a touchdown, according to whatever analytics models they use. So he was running hard all night. Had a good night through the air as well, 3 for 43. But yeah, just another strange game. This is like 3 times in 4 weeks now where you come away just kind of scratching your head with what we saw from the Chiefs.
Yeah, honestly, even the Jaguars win. I mean, the offense was okay, wasn't great. I mean, Mahomes got his yards, but I thought the broadcast did make one good point, and that is the receiver. They're getting nothing from the wide receiver crew.
No,
nothing. MVS dropped a ball that was just a bad drop. He's supposed to be the guy that makes a big play every once in a while, and they're getting
that was a ridiculous throw by Mahomes. I believe that was like a 3rd and long, right?
Yeah.
Hit him. I mean, could not have been a better throw and just right off his hands. I mean, Kadarius Toney. I think we kind of knew there was some risk here, but I mean, he looks just awful, just a complete non-factor. I thought Rashee Rice made some plays. I mean, the 3 for 32 is not going to jump out at you at all, but had some nice runs after the catch. I think he continues to be somebody that I have some faith that as this year goes along will be a more consistent threat for them.
Yeah, I agreed. And hey, they just won a Super Bowl with this same lack of receiving crew. So I mean, you can't be too critical of the Chiefs roster management, especially in a salary cap world. But man, it's but you know what? Last year they went through some struggles at times. The year before that, they went through some struggles at times mid-season. They seem to figure it out.
They're going to have a nice chance to figure it out because their next 4 games are Minnesota, Denver, the Chargers, Denver again. If you can't figure it out against those defenses, I mean, this is a very nice little runway for the Chiefs to start trying some things.
Yeah. I think Brian Cook was in the forum was complaining about Travis Kelce's performance. Hang on, Brian. You got 2 Denver games coming up. Yeah. Things are going to get useful real quick. So yeah. and Kelsey's coming back from an injury. I think he's back. Just because a player is back doesn't mean he's cured. Doesn't mean he's 100%. I mean, we see that all the time. Guys get cleared from the injury list, but they're playing hurt. And I think that's clearly the case with Kelsey. And of course, you're playing the Jets defense, which is really good. And he is when you're the primary target, the only threat, you're gonna get some creative defenses thrown at him too. But things will come around. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Kelsey at all. Just kind of a weird game where the Chiefs, didn't have as many red zone possessions as you'd think. They settled for a couple of field goals where they were right on the borderline of the red zone. Just kind of usually where Travis Kelsey makes his bones is when it's first and goal from the 7-yard line, and they just weren't in that situation last night.
Yep, exactly. This was the other near cover that wasn't the opposite side where the favorite would have covered, but Mahomes is smart. It was the absolute right play was to go down right there. You take kneel downs, game's over. It's frustrating when you're on the Chiefs, but that was the right play.
It was the right play. I also think if you kind of just jump into the end zone at I think at that point there was like a minute 12 left on the clock. You're up 10. I think you're feeling pretty good, but technically, yes, maybe the Jets return the kickoff and then get an onside kick. Like, yeah, you're right.
Like there's no way to lose the game if
there's zero way. Unless you fumble a snap on a kneel down, which they did not do. So, math says it's the right thing to do. Caution says it's the right thing to do. I get it, but that was a brutal play to watch. Like knowing that it's like they need a touchdown on this play because the field goal doesn't do you any good for the cover, and obviously a first down that's not a touchdown does it even worse. So. Tough way to go out on the Chiefs there. Not only that play, but Mahomes throwing the 2 picks, basically blowing a 17-point lead. But it is what it is. That's why it's tough.
The 24-yard scramble kind of made up for things there a little bit too, though. That was a ridiculous scramble.
That was nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. So, All right. Any other observations for the week before we sign off?
Not too much. I think we went pretty deep on most of these games. I encourage everybody who's watching along. If you're listening to this pod later today, check us out on Sirius XM. We'll be on during Giants Seahawks tonight, 7 to 9 Central.
So chances are we'll have plenty of time to talk about other stuff. But we'll have live look-ins on the game. We'll have some observations. Nick will be sweating a Matt Breida bet no doubt.
Literally, yes.
Yes, literally sweating it there. That's a very good point. Thanks everybody for jumping in the comments. Thanks for everybody listening in live. Thanks to those of you listening on your podcast. And we got Joe and Jake tomorrow. An important waiver wire week where there's not too many obvious pickups. So they'll be diving into some of the corners there to help you out. Thanks for listening. Take care.